this is just a kind of quick explanation of the map of Westeros. I remember when I first started watching the show, I was really confused about the distance between the different kingdoms, the landscape, the different history that they have to it, because it's all really overwhelming. The books have a lot of details about the land and the history that they can't really show in the show without, taking up the entire thing. So just to kind of help you out, I just made a really brief version of it. You can Google any map of Westeros, but they're really overwhelming for the most part. I kind of just took the most important houses that you see in the show and wanted to explain those to you, but I also just have some kind of little random fun facts in it. Hopefully this is entertaining too. I've been watching almost continuously just random YouTube videos lately, so I felt like I could make one myself, but no one needs me to explain the map of Game of Thrones except for you. So this is my little treat to you, featuring every Game of Thrones book that I own. Let's get started. So this is Westeros. It's called the Seven Kingdoms. Forever ago, Aegon Targaryen, known as Aegon the Conqueror, came to Westeros and he united the Seven Kingdoms. Aegon came from Old Valyria. It doesn't really matter right now, but I'll explain it briefly, but it is really interesting, the history of Old Valyria. Old Valyria was a peninsula in Essos. Essos is the continent to the east of Westeros. It's massive. Valyria was this really old, ancient land, but it was destroyed in this massive tragedy called the Doom of Valyria. Just before this doom occurred, Daenerys the Dreamer saw in a dragon dream prophecy the doom coming and destroying all of the occupants of Old Valyria. So she told her family and they escaped to Dragonstone, which is this island here. When Aegon came and decided to conquer Westeros, he landed here at King's Landing. They named it that because they're creative. Aegon came with his two sisters, Visenya and Rhaenys. It was old Valyrian tradition to marry within the family because the Valyrians were dragon riders, and the ability to command and ride dragons is carried through the blood, so they wanted to keep their blood as pure as possible. They were Sky Nazis. Aegon married Visenya out of this tradition and duty. Visenya was severe and cold, and she was kind of power hungry. She was really skilled at military strategy, and she flew the dragon Vhagar and carried a Valyrian steel called Dark Sister. Valyrian steel is a secret skill to make stronger, sharper, and lighter swords. They say that nothing cuts like Valyrian steel. But the secret to make this type of steel was lost during the Doom, and so now no one knows how to make it. So there are only a few swords left in Westeros, and they're very heavily prized. The first sword that we see that's Valyrian steel in the show is the sword owned by Ned Stark and the Stark family. They've had it for centuries and it's been passed down from family member to family member. This sword is called Ice. It's called a great sword and it's too big to be used in battle. So I think it's the biggest Valyrian steel sword that they have in the entire country. So it's a really prized possession of them. Aegon also carried a Valyrian steel sword called Blackfire, but we don't really see that as often. In House of the Dragon, we see Daemon Targaryen, who's called the Rogue Prince. He now carries Dark Sister. So that sword has been passed down for generations as well. Anyways, Aegon truly loved Rhaenys and he married her out of love. Rhaenys was more free-spirited, she loved the small folk, music, and comedy. And she was basically everything that Visenya was not, but she was also a skilled fighter and also flew her own dragon that I can't remember its name. They were all really loyal and trusted each other a lot because they were the last Targaryens and the last blood of Old Valyria. I'll explain it a little bit more later when it comes up, but the Valyrians were really rich and powerful because of their dragons, but also because they were a massive slave colony, and they really abused their slaves to mine for them, so they had a lot of gems and jewels, and so they were really big in the slavery game. Because of that and their connection to the dragons, the Targaryens frequently think of themselves related more closely to the gods than to men, so they think that they're better than everyone. The Targaryens will frequently mention that they are of the blood of Old Valyria because that's a really important ancestry to them, because again, they are Nazis. In King's Landing, the actual castle is called the Red Keep, for the red stone that it was made out of. In the Red Keep is the Iron Throne, which is a throne created completely by the swords of the men that lost to Aegon in battle or yielded their sword to his command. In the show, the Iron Throne is actually pretty small, but in the books, it's a massive, towering thing that takes up almost the entire room. It's like 1,000,000 feet tall, and it has a ton of swords. And then sometimes throughout the Targaryen reign, they would continue to add more swords for anyone that they defeated. This is where the current king, Bobby B, King Robert Baratheon, sits the Iron Throne. The area surrounding King's Landing is known as the Crown Lands, and the people that live here are mostly minor lords that are loyal directly to the crown. They don't have a warden of this area, it's just whoever sits the Iron Throne, usually king. Robert Baratheon is from the Stormlands. His family's castle is called Storm's End, around here. Robert used to be this amazing fighter called the Maiden's Fantasy because he was really masculine, he was over 6 feet tall, muscled, had a big beard, and he was a great fighter. While he fought in wars, he preferred to fight in melees where he fought with a iron-spiked warhammer and a antlered helmet that made him look like an antlered god. Robert has 2 younger brothers, Stannis and Renly. Robert and Stannis are only about 1 year apart, but Renly was born when both of them were in their teens, so he's a lot younger. During the time of the show, Robert's youngest brother Renly is Lord of Storm's End. He also serves as Master of Laws, so he's actually in the show in the Red Keep, attending small councils. While Stannis is the Lord of Dragonstone. Dragonstone was the ancestral seat of House Targaryen, but during the rebellion, the Baratheons took it over and is now occupied by Stannis. Stannis also serves on the small council as Master of Ships, but he's not really present during the show for any of these meetings. He's mostly at Dragonstone. Bobby B married Cersei Lannister, the daughter of Lord Tywin Lannister. Tywin is the richest man in Westeros. Bobby B and Cersei have 3 children together, Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen. Joffrey is a little rat-faced boy, but in the books he's supposed to be really handsome and beautiful, and he's supposed to look just like Jaime Lannister. Myrcella is beautiful and amazing, and I love her actress. And Tommen is just like a cute little fat baby. Just an FYI, the actors for Myrcella and Tommen will change because as the show progressed, the actors, they were growing at a higher rate than they should be in the show. So the pictures I'm showing might not match the actors that you're currently looking at, but I think they do a pretty good job of making them look pretty similar. This area here is ruled by the Lannisters. As Lord Tywin Lannister serves at Casterly Rock. The Lannisters control Lannisport, and they got rich from imports and exports and Lannisport wine. Tywin Lannister was the hand of the king to the former King Aerys, known as the Mad King. He's called the Shield of Lannisport and the Warden of the West. He's the father of twins Cersei and Jaime and Tyrion the Imp. Cersei was originally promised to marry Prince Rhaegar, Aerys' son, but that didn't really work out, and instead he married Princess Ilya of Dorne. During the rebellion, Rhaegar killed Lyanna Stark, who is Ned Stark's sister. Lyanna was promised to marry Robert Baratheon because he was in love with her, but when she died, he instead married Cersei to unite 2 of the strongest families in Westeros under his new regime. This massive area here is the North. The North is the biggest section of Westeros. This is Winterfell, the most northern castle, and considered to be the capital of the North. The Starks have held this castle for like 1 billion years. No one else has really held a castle for as long as they have, so the Starks are one of the oldest families in Westeros and are highly respected. Throughout the show, you'll frequently hear Northerners say, "The North remembers," and this is just kind of pointing out how long their history is and how the North has so much respect for the Starks. In the show, we follow Ned Stark, Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North, Catelyn Stark, formerly Tully, and their children, Robb, Sansa, Arya, Bran, and Rickon, and Ned's bastard son, Jon Snow. As a bastard, Jon can't have the last name Stark, so he's instead given the name Snow to indicate his bastard status and that he was raised in the North. And I know this is a little confusing too, so just a quick little explanation. You saw in the first episode that every Stark kid and Jon Snow all got direwolf puppies. It's kind of hard to keep them straight, but I think they all look pretty different, so it's kind of easy. But just quickly, here are the names. Rickon is the baby, so when he got a dog, he named it Shaggy Dog. Love that for him. Then there's Bran. Bran's gonna name his direwolf Summer. Next, Arya names her direwolf Nymeria. Nymeria is named after Princess Nymeria of the Rhonar. The Rhonar is another ancient race from Essos. Like I said, the Valyrians had these massive colonies of slaves that they used to mine for them. Princess Nymeria was famous for her 10,000 ships, and you'll frequently hear that be mentioned in passing. She used these 10,000 ships to help escaped slaves run away from the oppression of the Valyrians. Looking for a new home for these 10,000 ships and their slaves that they carried, Nymeria went to Dorne, and she ended up populating the island there. It's not an island, sorry, it's just a piece of land. Later, I'll kind of explain some of the history of Dorne that we know about and why they're not really in the show, because Dorne was the last kingdom to join the Seven Kingdoms. This is largely because they were old Valyrian slaves, and that's where their roots were from, and that they didn't want to be united under a Targaryen king. Sansa, because she's all like orderly and wants to be a lady, of course she names her little perfect direwolf Lady. She's beautiful. This is actually Sophie Turner, the actress, by the way. She's married to Joe Jonas, if you didn't know that. She actually adopted the dog that played her direwolf on the show, and I think that's so fucking cute. Look at them. I love Sophie Turner so much. Next we have Jon Snow, obviously. Jon Snow gets Ghost. He's albino, has red eyes. He's really fucking scary. They call him Ghost because that just makes him scarier. Then we have Robb. He names his direwolf Grey Wind. It's kind of hard to keep all the wolves straight, so this was just a little brief explanation of the dogs. Anyways, back to the map. This is the Wall. This is where Jon Snow goes to join the Night's Watch. The Night's Watch is a brotherhood that protects the Seven Kingdoms from the Free Folk and the wildlings that live beyond the Wall. The area beyond the Wall is creatively called the Land of Always Winter, because it's always winter there. Brandon Stark is called Brandon the Builder, and he's mostly credited for building the massive wall that stretches for miles and is like, I think 700 feet tall, to protect the Seven Kingdoms from the people beyond the Wall. When winter comes, the wildlings tend to invade the northern region for food and survival. Living in the Land of Always Winter is so harsh that women don't name their children until they're at least 2 years old because there's such a high rate of infant mortality. The Night's Watch used to be this honorable brotherhood, but now it mostly consists of criminals that are sent there as a punishment, because when you join the Night's Watch, you have to promise to not hold any land, take any wives, or have any children. Your sole purpose is to defend the Seven Kingdoms, and they don't want you to be distracted by love, family, or power. Jon Snow joins because he wants to earn some honor to his name, which he feels like he can't do anywhere else because he's a bastard. Bastards are considered to be born dishonorably and are therefore bad people prone to treachery. The Lord Commander of the Night's Watch is elected by the brothers, and the current one is Jeor Mormont of Bear Island, so another northerner. He also has a Valyrian steel sword, and it's called Longclaw because his sigil is a bear, and bears have claws that are long. I moved my camera closer, don't sue me. Ned Stark has a younger brother named Benjen Stark, and he's a brother of the Night's Watch, and Jon really looks up to Benjen. Benjen is a ranger at the Night's Watch, and so he ventures into the north, tracking wildlings to try to prevent further invasions. This is what Jon really wants to do. Really quickly, this is the Iron Islands. They do kind of show up in the later part of the show, so I don't really need to explain them too much, but just for some context, this is where Theon Greyjoy is from. While King Robert's rebellion was working to overthrow the Targaryen regime, Theon's dad, Balon Greyjoy, also fought a rebellion to try to succeed from the Seven Kingdoms and rule themselves independently. It didn't really work, and Ned Stark and Bobby B stopped this rebellion. During the rebellion, Balon's older two sons died, and so Ned Stark took Theon, the eldest living son, as a ward, as a political prisoner to prevent future rebellions under King Robert. I already told you that Ned and Robert grew up together. This is because they were both raised as wards to Jon Arryn of the Vale. Jon Arryn was like a foster father to them, and they were raised at the Eyrie, which is this really high up mountain. And you'll see it later in the show, but in the books it's described as being a lot more treacherous to get to. Jon Arryn is called Lord of the Eyrie, Defender of the Vale, and the Warden of the East. So this area here is the Vale. Jon Arryn served as Hand of the King to King Robert, replacing Tywin Lannister, who held the position for the former king. Peter Baelish is also from this area. It's called the Fingers because they were creative. He's called Littlefinger because he was the youngest sibling and therefore was considered to be the lord of the smallest finger. Creative. Jon Arryn was married to Lysa Tully, who is the sister of Catelyn.
Hi, this is editor Elena. Just want to pop in real fast and point out that a lot of people really hate the character of Catelyn because they think she's petty, but I want to go ahead and put in some bias and let you know that she's the best fucking character. She's such a mom boss, and if you hate her, I'm gonna reconsider this friendship because she's great. Yeah, she's flawed and has her moments of being an absolute bitch. Who the fuck doesn't? This is feminism feudalism. She's allowed to be a fucking bitch as long as she's a bad bitch, okay? We stan Catelyn.
Which is disgusting because Jon Arryn was Ned's foster father, making him like 80 fucking years old, and Lysa was Catelyn's younger sister, who's like fucking 20. Catelyn and Lysa are from the Riverlands, and the ruling house is House Tully of Riverrun. Another interesting seat in the Riverlands is called the Twins, and is held by the Freys, and the lord of the time is Walder Frey. They're not super significant, they don't have a lot of power, and they are supposed to be loyal to House Tully, but they are these interesting kind of weird trolls because their twins are two towers on the other side of a massive body of water that connects it with a big bridge, and they are little trolls that have to force people to pay to cross. They'll show up later in the show kind of minorly, so I won't really explain them too much, but they are interesting to note. Also here in the Riverlands is the largest castle in the Seven Kingdoms, Harrenhal. Harrenhal I don't think is ever shown in the show itself, but it's really interesting, and it's also constantly referenced, and if you don't get the reference, none of the comments really make sense to you, so I didn't get it the first time watching it. During the time of Aegon the Conqueror, before he was able to unite the kingdoms, each section was its own kingdom. One of the most prominent kings at the time was Harren the Black of House Hoare. Not horror, but H-O-A-E-R. I'll make that clear. There are no whores in this. Only all the other whores that there are in the show. There are a lot. Anyways, my mind is fixated on whores now, I can't. Anyways, Harren the Black refused to kneel to the king because he knew that he had one of the strongest and largest castles in the kingdoms. Its walls were so high that no one could breach them. However, Aegon flew the largest and most dangerous and brutal dragon that Westeros had ever seen, Balerion the Black Dread. By the time of Game of Thrones, Balerion is long dead, but they keep his skull in the crypts of the Red Keep, and you can see the side scale, but he's supposed to be a lot bigger in the books, so keep that in mind. On the back of Balerion, Aegon flew over the walls and scorched the castle and everyone in it, efficiently ending the line of this entire family of a great king. Since the burning of Harrenhal, the castle is thought to be cursed. It's one of the richest regions in Westeros and highly desirable for that, but people are scared to hold it because of this curse. Every house that holds it eventually meets some kind of horrible end, so that's why it's referenced continuously. The major theme surrounding Harrenhal is the idea of hubris and the fact that no one is safe from the Stranger, the god of death. The Stranger is one of 7 gods known to the Faith of the Seven, which is the most dominant religion in the region. In the north, it's not really followed too much. In the north, they follow the old gods and they worship these weirwood trees. In the first episode, you see Catelyn and Ned talking by a weirwood tree. It has these really scary faces carved into them, and they mostly have blood dripping from their eyes and mouth because people used to make blood sacrifices to the gods at these trees, and it's said that the roots sucked up the blood. You can see why it's not a super popular religion anymore, and that people were kind of scared of northerners. Anyways, in the south, the weirwood trees have been mostly cut down because when the other dominant religions start popping up, they thought that northerners were using some kind of weird magic to watch them through the eyes of the trees and spy on them. So the trees have been removed, and there are still weirwood trees beyond the wall. Another area that doesn't follow the Faith of the Seventh and also doesn't follow the old gods is the Iron Islands. One of the reasons they never followed the old gods is because the weirwood trees can't grow on their islands for some reason. They have a different god called the Drowned God. The Drowned God is like basically Poseidon, and they kind of just worship the ocean because they have a really big navy, and the Iron Islands is basically just pirates. They don't call them pirates because in the show, in the books, there are actual pirates, and the Iron Islands are not the same, but they are kind of a more primitive, harsh community of seafarers. Anyways, lastly on the map, there is the Reach. The Reach is a really lush area of plants. So they're one of the richest regions of the area because most of the food comes from this land. In this world, the seasons are really irregular. Sometimes the summer can stretch on for 50 years. Sometimes it will last 1 year. Sometimes winter can last 50 years. And when winter comes, food is really hard to come by. That's why the Reach is really important. The house that rules the Reach is the Tyrells. They do come in later in the show, kind of, but they're not super prominent. The Tyrells are the second richest house after the Lannisters, but arguably the more important house is the Hightowers. The Hightowers I don't think are ever really in Game of Thrones, or if they are, they're kind of minor. But during House of the Dragon, the Hightowers are the second most prominent family after the Targaryens. The area of the Hightowers is probably the religious capital of Westeros because of their close proximity to the Starry Sept, which is the base of the Faith of the Seven, and its connection to the Citadel, which is where the maesters go to train. It's like a massive library filled with books and shit, and so they go there to train. So then lastly, there's Dorne, that is ruled by House Martell of Sunspear. Like I said, Dorne was the last of the Seven Kingdoms to join. They held out the entire time of Aegon the Conqueror, and they only joined a lot after that. Rhaegar married Ilya Martell instead of marrying Cersei Lannister in an attempt to finally bring Dorne fully into the Seven Kingdoms. But when she was killed during the rebellion, Dorne completely peaced out and they said, you know what? Fuck you guys. They kind of want no part in it anymore, so they're not really relevant in the show. I don't necessarily like their portrayal in the show. I do wish they were more in it because they are kind of in the books, just not in the beginning. But they're really fucking interesting and I love them. So, like I said, Princess Nymeria of the Rhoynar is the one that brought people to Dorne, and they ended up taking over and formed this really powerful house of the Martells. So this was just kind of a brief explanation. I know it was probably kind of longer than you wanted, but there's so much more I can talk about, and if you want me to, I would love to. I made this whole thing without doing any research. This is all just top of my head shit. So I could definitely do more if you want. But I told you Nymeria came from Essos. So there's another massive continent called Essos to the east. It's freaking huge. No one knows all the history to it, but there is a lot. It's in Essos that Daenerys marries the Dothraki, but there's also this huge other massive continent called Southerros and another one called Eurthos. There's so many continents and there's so much backstory and history to all of this stuff that it's so fucking interesting to me how much of a world they built for this series. And again, that means I could talk about it forever, and while this video was really long, all of these things are things that you'll follow in the show and they're important to know, but I barely scratched the surface of all the lords even in Westeros itself. There's so much backstory and lore that goes into everything, and it's frequently mentioned in the shows and the books, but it's not fully developed, or it's not really looked into just because it's not super relevant. But it's all so interesting to me, and I hope it was interesting to you, and I also hope it was helpful and kind of entertaining because I had a lot of fun trying to make a video, and this is not my strong suit.